Story 1. The sun rose slowly over Virginia Beach, casting a warm golden hue across the sand, where families began to converge for the Memorial Day festivities. Laughter and playful shouts filled the air as children dashed toward the water, their feet sinking into the soft sand. I stood at the edge of the beach, a wide-brimmed hat shielding my eyes from the bright sun, watching my son Tommy as he chased after a group of his friends. My heart swelled with joy. This was exactly what I envisioned for us. A day of freedom, laughter, and togetherness. Mom, look at me. Tommy's voice rang out, pulling my attention. He was holding a plastic bucket, proudly displaying the sandcastle he and his friends had built. The structure was modest, but to him, it was a fortress fit for a king. That's amazing, sweetie. I called back, a smile spreading across my face. My heart felt light as I watched him, his blonde hair tousled by the ocean breeze. He was so innocent, so blissfully unaware of the world's darker realities. As I turned my gaze toward the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The waves lapped rhythmically against the shore, and the air was filled with the scent of salt and sunscreen. Families were setting up picnic blankets, and the smell of grilled food wafted through the air. It was a perfect day until it wasn't. A sudden crack pierced the cheerful atmosphere, sharp and jarring. My heart dropped as I turned to scan the crowd, confusion hanging in the air like a thick fog. Children stopped playing, their laughter fading into uneasy whispers. What was that? I muttered to myself, gripping the edge of my beach towel tightly. Then it happened again, louder this time, echoing through the throngs of people, a sound that should never belong on a day like today. Panic erupted. Parents grabbed their children, and people began to scatter in every direction. My heart raced as I shouted, "Tommy! Tommy!" I pushed my way through the chaos, fear clawing at my insides like a wild animal. "Mom, where are you?" His voice was a beacon in the storm of panic, but it was quickly drowned out by the screams and cries around me. The world spun as I searched for his familiar face, my mind racing with dread. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." I yelled, but my words felt useless against the chaos. I could see people tripping over one another, some collapsing to the ground, others running blindly. My vision blurred, and I fought back the panic rising in my throat. "Help! Someone help!" I heard a woman scream nearby as she clutched her child, the terror in her eyes mirroring my own. I had to find Tommy. I had to get to him. I pushed past a group of people, my heart pounding in my chest. "Tommy?" I screamed again, desperation clawing at my throat. I could feel the sand sticking to my legs, the heat of the sun now a distant memory overshadowed by the cold grip of fear. Then I spotted him, my little boy, standing frozen in place, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. He was looking around, seemingly unaware of the chaos unfolding around him. I rushed toward him, my heart racing with a mix of relief and terror. "Tommy? Baby, come here." He turned to me, his face pale, and for a moment time stood still. I reached him just as another series of shots rang out, a loud cacophony that shattered the fragile calm I'd managed to create. My heart sank. I grabbed his hand tightly, pulling him close. "Mom, what's happening?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Shoo, it's okay. We need to go. Now," I replied, my own voice shaking. I looked around, trying to gauge the safest route away from the horror unfolding around us. People were still running, and the sound of panic echoed in my ears. As I led Tommy through the throng of panicked bodies, my heart raced with the thought of what was happening. I could hardly process it. The laughter, the joy, the innocence of the day had been ripped away in an instant. All I could think about was getting my son to safety, away from the chaos, away from the nightmare that had invaded our Memorial Day celebration. The air was thick with chaos and disbelief as I arrived at the beach. The sun, which had previously bathed Virginia Beach in warmth and joy, now hung high above like a cruel reminder of the day that had turned into a nightmare. I parked my car haphazardly on the side of the road, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped out, the cacophony of screams, sirens, and the distant cries of those in pain assaulted my senses. "Mike, over here." I heard a voice call out. It was Officer Daniels, waving frantically to grab my attention. I rushed over, my mind racing with the questions that needed answers. "What the hell happened here?" I asked, my voice strained. "Looks like a gunman opened fire on the crowd," he replied, his face pale and drawn. "We're still trying to get a handle on everything." I nodded, swallowing hard as I surveyed the scene. Families who had been laughing and enjoying their day just moments before were now scattered across the sand, some seeking shelter, others running for their lives. I spotted a mother cradling her child, both covered in sand and tears, and my stomach twisted at the sight. "Where's the shooter?" I asked, scanning the area for any sign of him. Last we heard, he fled toward the boardwalk. We're setting up a perimeter, Daniel said, pointing to the officers mobilizing in the distance. Let's move, I urged, already striding toward the chaos. As we approached the boardwalk, I noticed a local news reporter, Jessica, her camera capturing the harrowing moments unfolding around us. She was interviewing a witness, a young woman whose voice trembled as she recounted the horror. I was just getting ice cream, the woman whispered, tears streaming down her face. And then I heard the shots. People were screaming, running. I thought I was going to die. Jessica. I called out, trying to grab her attention. She turned, her expression shifting from shock to determination. Mike, this is insane. The community is in shambles, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding us. I need to get the word out. People need to know what's happening. Just be careful, I warned her, knowing that the situation could escalate at any moment. With a nod, she turned back to her camera, her voice firm as she began to report live. We're here at Virginia Beach, where a tragic shooting has occurred, leaving many injured and several families shattered. Eyewitness accounts describe a chaotic scene. As I continued to scan the area, I caught glimpses of officers tending to the wounded, their faces grim. I felt a knot in my stomach as I thought about the families who would never be whole again. The sounds of sirens blaring mixed with the cries of the injured created a symphony of despair, one I would never forget. In a darkened corner of the beach, away from the chaos, I saw a figure crouched down, his back to me. David, the shooter. My instincts kicked in and I approached cautiously, feeling a mix of anger and pity. He looked disheveled, his hands trembling as he whispered to himself, the voices in his head seemingly louder than the reality around him. David, I said firmly, making my presence known. He flinched but didn't turn around. You need to come with me. You're not alone in this. Leave me alone, he shouted suddenly, his voice cracking. They don't understand. They never understood. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. What are you talking about? Tell me what happened. We can help you. He turned slowly, his eyes wide and glazed, as if he were trapped in a world only he could see. I didn't want to. I just wanted them to listen. They never listened. His voice trailed off into a whisper, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Listen to what, David? You've hurt so many people. You need to help us understand, I pressed, desperate for answers that might help unravel this tragedy. He shook his head violently, tears streaming down his face. You don't know. You don't know what it's like. I took a deep breath, realizing that I was dealing with a fractured mind, one that had spiraled into darkness. But I also knew that if I could get through to him, perhaps we could prevent further tragedy. As the world around us continued to unravel, I felt the weight of the day pressing down on me, a burden I knew would haunt me for years to come. The beach, once a place of joy, was now stained with sorrow, and I was determined to uncover the truth behind this massacre, no matter where it led me. The air was thick with grief as I stood among the flickering candles at the vigil, my heart feeling heavier with each passing moment. Faces I recognized from the neighborhood blurred around me, their expressions a mix of sorrow and disbelief. I clutched a small photograph of Tommy in my trembling hands, the corners frayed from countless times I had taken it out to gaze at his smiling face. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows, but nothing could chase away the darkness that had settled over Virginia Beach. Sarah? A voice broke through my thoughts. It was Lisa, a mom from the PDA. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her voice trembled. I can't believe this is happening. I just saw him playing, just hours ago. I know, I replied, my voice cracking. He was so happy. We were going to get ice cream after the parade. My words trailed off as a lump formed in my throat. The image of Tommy running toward me, his laughter ringing like music, felt like a cruel joke now. Lisa wrapped her arms around me, and for a moment, I allowed myself to lean into her embrace, drawing strength from her presence. You're not alone in this, Sarah. We're all here for you. As the vigil progressed, people began to share their stories, voices rising and falling like the tide. A father spoke about his daughter, who had been terrified and confused amidst the chaos, while a teenage girl recounted her desperate attempts to help those who had fallen. I listened, each story a reminder of the fragility of life and the bonds we shared in our community. When it was my turn to speak, I felt the weight of every eye on me. Tommy was my light. I started, my voice barely a whisper. He was only 9, and he had this way of making everything brighter. He loved the beach, the sun, the laughter. I paused, swallowing hard as emotions threatened to overwhelm me. He didn't deserve this. I'm so sorry, someone from the crowd called out, their voice filled with compassion. Thank you, I managed to respond, tears spilling down my cheeks. I want to understand why. Why did this happen? Why him? As I looked around, I saw nods of agreement, people sharing my pain and confusion. They too were desperate for answers, craving a sense of closure that felt impossibly far away. Meanwhile, not far from the vigil, Detective Mike was hunched over his notes, the chaos of the beach replaying in his mind like a broken record. He had spent hours interviewing survivors, piecing together their fragmented accounts of the nightmare. Each story revealed a new layer of horror, and with each revelation his own demons surfaced. "Hey, detective," a fellow officer said, approaching him with a concerned expression. "You all right? You've been at this for a while." "Yeah," Mike replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just trying to make sense of it all." He rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the tension coiling there. "I need to speak to more witnesses. Someone has to know something." As he stood, he caught a glimpse of Sarah at the vigil, her pain almost palpable. He felt an urge to approach her, to offer some words of comfort, but he hesitated. What could he say that would ease her suffering? Instead, he returned to his notepad, scribbling down a thought that had occurred to him. There's got to be a timeline here. A reason why this happened. In a dim prison cell, David sat with his head in his hands, staring blankly at the wall. The psychiatrist across from him, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, had been trying to make sense of his fractured psyche for weeks. "David, can you tell me what led you to that day? What were you feeling?" David looked up, his expression a mix of defiance and despair. "I was just tired of being ignored. Tired of the world pretending everything was fine while I was screaming inside." "Did you believe you were making a statement?" she probed gently. He chuckled, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "A statement? Maybe. But it was more than that. It was like I was a puppet, strings pulled by someone who knew exactly what they wanted." His eyes flickered with a hint of desperation. "I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I had to make them see." As he spoke, a shadow passed across his face, a flicker of something darker lurking just beneath the surface. "They don't know the whole truth. They think it's just me, but there's more at play here. Much more." In that moment, it became clear to the psychiatrist that unraveling David's motivations would be far more complicated than she had anticipated. The pieces of this tragedy were not only about loss but also about the hidden machinations of a troubled mind, waiting to be exposed. I stared at the anonymous letter in disbelief. The paper, yellowed and creased, felt foreign in my hands, as if it had materialized from the depths of my worst nightmares. "Your son was targeted," it read in a scrawled handwriting that sent shivers down my spine. It was a simple message, but its implications were devastating. I had lost Tommy in an act of senseless violence, yet here was a suggestion that it was anything but random. My heart raced as my mind spiraled into chaos, each thought crashing against the other like waves against the shore. "Mom?" My daughter Lily's voice broke through the fog of my thoughts. She stood in the doorway, her bright eyes filled with concern. She had been my rock since that day, yet I hated that she had to witness my descent into this dark pit of anguish. "It's nothing, sweetheart," I lied, folding the letter and shoving it into my pocket. "Just some old junk mail." "Are you sure? You look—" "I don't know," worried. I forced a smile, but it felt brittle, like glass on the verge of shattering. "I'm okay, really. Just tired." Lily nodded, but I could see that she wasn't convinced. As she retreated to her room, I sank into the couch, the weight of the letter heavy on my chest. What could it mean? Who would want to target my son, and why? Later that afternoon, I found myself pacing the living room, the letter tugging at my conscience. I needed answers. With a deep breath, I grabbed my keys and headed out, determination fueling my steps. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows as I made my way to the police station. Detective Mike had been so focused on the case. Perhaps he could shed some light on this new development. As I entered the station, the familiar smell of coffee and paper filled the air. I spotted Mike hunched over his desk, scribbling notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Detective," I called out, urgency lacing my voice. He looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Sarah, what brings you here?" I approached his desk, the letter clutched tightly in my hand. "I received this." Mike took the letter from me, his expression shifting as he read the words. "Targeted? This is concerning. I need to know what this means. Tommy was just a kid. Why would anyone want to hurt him?" Mike leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "Let me see what I can find. There may be more to David's story than we initially thought." "David?" I echoed, my stomach turning at the name. "The shooter? What do you mean?" There were some leads about David being in contact with a man who had a history with local gangs. It's possible he wasn't acting alone. My heart sank. A gang? But why would they care about my son? That's what I intend to find out, Mike replied, a determined look in his eyes. He reached for his phone, dialing a number quickly. I'm going to pull up everything we have on David's contacts. We need to get to the bottom of this. As he spoke, I felt a mix of hope and dread. What if Tommy had been caught in the crossfire of something much larger than I ever imagined? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a dark abyss, teetering dangerously close to the truth. After we finished our discussion, I left the station, my mind racing with possibilities. I needed to find out more about this mysterious connection. I had to protect Lily and uncover the truth about what happened to Tommy, even if it meant diving deeper into the murky waters of Virginia Beach's underbelly. On my way home, I turned on the radio, hoping for some distraction from the turmoil inside my head. The news anchor's voice cut through the static, her words sending a chill down my spine. In the wake of the tragic shooting at Virginia Beach, reporter Jessica Evans has been following the story closely, uncovering details that could change everything we thought we knew. I gripped the steering wheel, the weight of the world crashing down on me once more. The town was being scrutinized and I feared what would come next. The secrets hidden beneath our picturesque facade were beginning to surface, and I was terrified of what we might find. As I pulled into the driveway, I caught a glimpse of Lily playing in the backyard, her laughter ringing out like a beacon in the darkness. I knew then that I had to find the truth, not just for Tommy but for her too. I stepped out of the car, determination surging through me. I would not let fear silence me, I would uncover the truth no matter the cost. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow across Virginia Beach as I drove down the familiar streets, the wind whipping through the open windows of my car. But the warmth didn't reach me. A chill settled in my bones as I clutched the steering wheel, my mind racing with thoughts of Tommy and the letter I had received, its ominous words still echoing in my head. Stop digging or else. I pulled into a dimly lit parking lot behind a local diner, a place I used to frequent with my son, back when life felt normal and safe. Now it felt like a facade, a thin veil over the darkness threatening to consume me. I stepped out, the gravel crunching under my feet, and glanced around. Was I being watched? The shadows seemed to leap and dance, but I shook the feeling off. I had to get to the bottom of this. Sarah. A voice broke through my thoughts, and I turned to see Detective Mike approaching, his face lined with concern. You shouldn't be out here alone. I have to find out what happened to Tommy, I insisted, my voice trembling but resolute. I think there's more to this than just David. He ran a hand through his hair, looking conflicted. I know, but it's dangerous. You have to let us handle it. Letting you handle it got us nowhere, I snapped, the frustration boiling over. I received a letter, Mike. Someone wants me to stop looking into David's connections. That means there's something there. I'm not backing down. Mike sighed heavily, his eyes narrowing in thought. All right, but you need to be careful. I'm teaming up with Jessica. She's been digging into local gang activity that might be connected to David. We need to know what we're dealing with. Gangs? You think they had something to do with the shooting? I asked, my heart racing at the thought. It's possible. We've heard whispers about a group operating in the area, dealing drugs, intimidation. It wouldn't be a stretch to think they could be involved in something as heinous as what happened on the beach. As we spoke, Jessica arrived, her notepad in hand, a determined look on her face. You two are not going to believe what I found, she said, excitement lacing her words. I tracked down some witnesses who saw David meeting with a couple of guys at a local bar a week before the shooting. Do you think they're part of the gang? Mike asked, his tone shifting to one of urgency. Absolutely. They're known for their ruthless tactics. If they were involved, we could be looking at something much bigger than just a lone shooter. Then we need to find out who they are, I said, my mind racing with possibilities. If David was working with them, there has to be a connection to Tommy. Jessica nodded, her expression serious. I'll reach out to my contacts. We'll need to move fast though. If they catch wind of what we're doing, then we'll be in danger, I finished for her, the weight of her words settling heavily on my chest. As we strategized, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated before pulling it out, the dread pooling in my stomach as I read the message that flashed across the screen. Stop your investigation or face the consequences. What is it? Mike asked, noticing my pale face. It's a threat, I whispered, my hands trembling. They know I'm looking into David's connections. We need to go to the police, Jessica urged, but I shook my head. No. If they're connected to the gang, that could put us all at risk. We can't go to the police yet. Then what do we do? Mike asked, his voice taut with tension. We keep digging, I said, determination hardening my resolve. I won't let them intimidate me. Tommy deserves the truth. Jessica and Mike exchanged glances, and I could see the wheels turning in their minds. All right, Mike finally said, but we'll do this together. We'll watch each other's backs. As we set our plan into motion, the weight of the threat loomed over me, a dark cloud that refused to disperse. I knew the danger was real, but I also knew that I couldn't stop now, not when the shadows of the past threatened to engulf everything I held dear. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. The warehouse loomed ahead like a dark omen, its peeling paint and broken windows embodying the secrets it held within. My heart raced as I parked my car, glancing at Mike and Jessica who sat in the vehicle beside mine, their expressions a mixture of determination and fear. Are we ready for this? I whispered, gripping Tommy's favorite toy, a small worn-out dinosaur, like a lifeline. Mike nodded, his jaw set. We don't have a choice, Sarah. If what we suspect is true, this could be our only chance to stop them. Jessica, ever the professional, adjusted her camera, the lens glinting ominously in the dim light. Let's get the footage. If we can expose them, maybe there's still hope for this town. I stepped out of the car, the chill of the night air biting at my skin. The sounds of the beach had faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that wrapped around us like a shroud. Stay close, Mike instructed, his voice low and steady. We approached the entrance, the cracked concrete crunching under our feet. Inside, the warehouse was a labyrinth of crates and shadows. I felt the weight of the past pressing down on me, the memories of that day on the beach flooding my mind. Tommy's laughter, his innocence, and the horror that followed felt like a ghost that trailed me. Keep your eyes peeled, Mike whispered as we moved deeper into the darkness. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the space, a muffled voice followed by laughter. I exchanged a glance with Jessica, who raised her camera, ready to capture whatever was about to unfold. We crept toward the sound and I could feel my pulse quickening. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if the air itself was warning us to turn back. As we rounded a corner, we stumbled upon a group of men, their faces partially obscured by the shadows. They were gathered around a table strewn with cash and weapons, their demeanor casual, as if they were simply conducting business. You think we can keep this under wraps? One of them laughed, his voice dripping with arrogance. After what happened at the beach, no one's going to care about a few dead kids if we keep the money flowing. My stomach churned and I felt bile rise in my throat. I instinctively clutched the dinosaur tighter, its plastic form grounding me in a moment of clarity. We need to record this, Jessica whispered fiercely, pressing the button to start filming. I watched as her hands trembled, her resolve faltering for just a moment. Without warning, one of the men turned, his eyes narrowing. Did you hear that? He growled, scanning the shadows. The tension snapped like a taut wire, and I felt the urge to flee. We need to go, I hissed, grabbing Jessica by the arm. But Mike held his ground, stepping forward. Wait. We can't let them get away with this. A confrontation erupted, and I could see Mike's fists clenched, his protective instinct kicking in. You think you can profit off of this? He shouted, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. You're monsters. The men laughed, but it was a cold, calculated sound, devoid of any humanity. You have no idea what you're getting into, detective, one of them sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. This isn't just about money, it's about power. And you're outnumbered. Before I could react, the atmosphere shifted. The doors slammed shut behind us and we were enveloped in darkness. Panic surged through me and I felt my breath quicken. We need to get out, I cried, my voice cracking. But just as I turned to flee, a figure stepped from the shadows. David. He looked different, more disheveled than I remembered, but those haunted eyes were unmistakable. You shouldn't have come here, he said, his voice a low growl, filled with a strange mix of anger and despair. You don't understand. They're watching you. They've been watching all of us. What do you mean? I demanded, stepping forward despite the fear coursing through my veins. You shot my son. Why would I listen to you? Because I didn't do it alone, he shouted, the desperation in his voice cutting through the tension. You think I wanted this? I was a pawn in their game and now they're coming for you too. As the words hung in the air, I grasped the implications. The realization crashed over me like a wave. This wasn't just about David, it was deeper, more sinister. The gang wasn't acting in isolation. They were part of a larger scheme, a conspiracy that reached beyond our town. Just then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Mike, his expression grave. We can't stay here. We need to get this information out. But as we turned, the men were closing in, their eyes glinting with predatory intent. Time's up, one of them snarled, and I felt the panic wash over me again. You'll regret ever stepping into our territory. I glanced back at David, whose face was a mask of regret and fear. Help us, I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. Please. But before he could respond, a gunshot rang out, echoing through the warehouse. Story 2. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon when my phone rang, jolting me from the comfortable haze of my Saturday afternoon. I squinted at the screen, recognizing the name flashing in bold letters, Emily. The urgency in her voice was palpable as I answered. Sarah. You need to get to Crystal Lake. It's Jason, he's gone. Her voice trembled, and I could hear her muffled sobs in the background. What do you mean gone? What happened? I asked, my heart racing. Jason Reed was a beloved figure in our town, a man who had always lent a hand and had a smile that could brighten the gloomiest of days. He drowned, Sarah. They're saying it was an accident, but I don't know. It all feels so wrong. The words hit me like a cold wave. I grabbed my jacket and rushed out the door, my mind swirling with disbelief. The drive to Crystal Lake felt interminable, the weight of the news pressing down on me. As I arrived, the scene was nothing like the usual festive atmosphere of Memorial Day weekend. There were no families laughing beside the water, no children splashing joyfully. Instead, somber faces and hushed whispers filled the air. I parked my car hastily and made my way toward the gathering crowd. The police had cordoned off the area near the dock, and I could see Jason's family huddled together, their faces etched with grief. It was a sight that twisted my stomach into knots. Sarah. Emily rushed toward me, her eyes red and puffy. I can't believe this happened. We were just celebrating. I know, Em. I'm so sorry, I said, pulling her into a tight embrace. What do you know? She took a shaky breath. They say he was out on a boat with some friends. They found him in the water a little while ago. The paramedics tried, but it was too late. I nodded, trying to process the information. I had to get the story to talk to witnesses. I pushed through the crowd, the murmurs of the townsfolk swirling around me like a thick fog. As I approached a group of onlookers, I overheard snippets of conversation. Some were reminiscing about Jason, while others exchanged wary glances. Two men stood apart, their voices rising in a heated argument. I can't believe you're trying to pin this on him. One man shouted, his face flushed. You never liked Jason. Always jealous of him, weren't you? Jealous? Don't you dare. He was a show-off, strutting around like he owned the place. And now he's gone and you think it's just an accident. The other man spat back, his hands clenched into fists. I took a step closer, my journalist instincts kicking in. What do you mean, just an accident? I interrupted, drawing their attention. The first man shot me a glare. And who are you? Sarah Thompson, local journalist. I'm just trying to understand what happened. The second man scoffed, his eyes narrowing. You think you can just come and dig into this? Jason was a good man. He didn't deserve this. Of course he didn't. But if there's something more to this story, it's my job to find out, I replied, feeling the tension in the air crackle. Their argument faded into the background as I tried to absorb the gravity of the situation. Jealousy? Rivalry? Could this have been more than just a tragic accident? I glanced back at the grieving family, my heart aching for them. I needed to know the truth, not just for my story but for Jason. The lake, which usually sparkled like a gem in the sunlight, now felt ominous, hiding secrets beneath its surface. As I turned to rejoin Emily, a chill ran down my spine. This was just the beginning. Something told me that the peaceful facade of our small town was about to shatter, and I was determined to uncover whatever lay beneath the surface. I sat at my cluttered desk, a half-empty coffee cup cooling beside me, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. The tragedy of Jason Reed's drowning weighed heavily on my mind, but it was the whispers of his past that haunted me more. With a deep breath, I pushed aside my doubts and grabbed my notebook. I needed to delve into Jason's life, particularly the controversial land deal that had divided our small town. As I parked my car outside the Reed family's modest home, the air was thick with unsaid words. I could see Jason's mother, Martha, through the window, her silhouette a stark reminder of the grief that engulfed so many. I knocked gently on the door and it creaked open almost immediately. Martha stood there, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy, but she managed a weak smile. Sarah, I didn't expect you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry for your loss, Martha. I want to help if I can, I replied, stepping inside. The house was filled with the scent of freshly baked bread, an odd contrast to the sorrow that clung to the walls. Thank you. I can't believe he's gone, she said, shaking her head as if trying to wake from a nightmare. I took a seat at the kitchen table, The warmth from the oven a small comfort against the cold reality of the situation. I was hoping to talk about Jason's life, and maybe some of the things he was involved in. Like the land deal? Martha's expression shifted, a flicker of something, fear perhaps, crossed her face. That was a difficult time for him. He believed in what he was doing, but it stirred up a lot of anger in the community. Did he ever mention receiving threats? Anything that made him feel unsafe? I probed gently, knowing how sensitive this topic was. She hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth. There were some kids who joked about him. "Watch your back, Jason," and things like that. But I thought it was just typical teenage nonsense. Her voice trailed off and I could see the regret in her eyes. Did he ever take it seriously? I pressed. No, he brushed it off. Jason was a good kid, but he had his share of enemies, especially after that deal went south, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Enemies? I asked, intrigued. There was this man, Tom Harris. He was furious about the land deal. I think he blamed Jason for everything, she said, her brow furrowed in concern. Tom? The community leader? I scribbled furiously in my notebook. I had heard the name before, always mentioned with respect, but now it sounded ominous. Yes, he had a lot of pull around here. People trusted him. But he didn't like Jason's ideas about the land. It was all very political, she replied, her eyes darting to the window as if expecting Tom to appear. I'll need to speak to him, I said, more to myself than to her. The pieces were starting to fit together, but I needed more information. As I left the Reed household, I felt a mix of determination and dread. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over Crystal Lake, a place that should have felt peaceful but now seemed tainted. Just as I reached my car, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Hello? I answered, my heart racing. Sarah Thompson? You're looking into Jason Reed's death, aren't you? A raspy voice asked. Who is this? I demanded, a shiver running down my spine. Just someone who knows the truth. Jason's drowning wasn't an accident. Dig deeper and you might find what you're looking for, the voice said before hanging up. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing. What did they mean? I felt a surge of adrenaline as the gravity of the situation sunk in. I had to uncover the truth. I had to find out what really happened to Jason. As I drove away, the silhouette of the lake loomed in my rearview mirror, a haunting reminder of the chaos that had begun to unfold. The tranquil water was now a sinister backdrop to secrets waiting to be uncovered. As I stepped into the local bar, a familiar smell of stale beer and fried food wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. The dim lighting created shadows that danced across the walls, and the sound of murmurs and clinking glasses filled the air. It was here, just hours before the tragedy, that Jason Reed had last been seen. I could almost feel the weight of the community's grief pressing down on me as I approached the bar, my notebook clutched tightly in my hands. Sarah. Hey, over here. I turned to see Mike, one of the regulars, waving me over. He was a burly man with an easy laugh, the kind of guy who seemed to know everyone's business. I slid onto a bar stool next to him, my heart racing with anticipation. Mike, I need to know what you saw the night Jason drowned, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He took a swig of his beer and leaned closer, lowering his voice as if afraid someone might overhear. I saw him, yeah. He was in here laughing, having a good time with the boys. But then, he got into it with Tom Harris. Tom? What did they argue about? I asked, my pen poised over the pages of my notebook. Something about the land deal. You know how heated things have been since Jason started pushing for that development. Tom was furious. Said something like, "You'll regret crossing me, Jason," Mike recounted, his brow furrowing as he recalled the moment. I scribbled furiously, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to form a clearer picture. Did anyone else hear that? He shrugged, glancing around the bar. A few folks did, but everyone's too scared to talk. It's a small town, you know? Everyone's got their secrets. As I continued to probe Mike for details, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. Other patrons chimed in with conflicting stories, each person painting a different picture of Jason's last night. One claimed he was laughing with friends, while another insisted he was alone, swaying slightly as he stumbled out the door. Did anyone see if he left with anyone? I pressed, hoping to catch a break in the narrative. Some said he went towards the lake. Others thought he headed to his car. A woman at the end of the bar chimed in, her voice shaky. But I don't know if I trust what I saw either. It was dark and, well, things got a little rowdy. I nodded, my mind racing. The sense of unease deepened as I contemplated the implications of these conflicting accounts. I thanked Mike and the others for their time and made my way outside, the cool air hitting my face like a splash of cold water. The edge of Crystal Lake was just a short walk away, and as I approached, the moonlight glimmered off the water's surface, casting an ethereal glow. I felt a shiver run down my spine. This was where it had all happened. I crouched by the water's edge, scanning the ground for anything out of the ordinary. The night was quiet, save for the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. And then I saw it, a glint of metal partially buried in the sand. My heart raced as I reached down, pulling out a small silver locket, its chain twisted and tangled. I opened it, revealing a picture of Jason and a woman I didn't recognize. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. Was this significant? Did it hold the key to unraveling the truth behind his death? As I held the locket in my palm, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A chill crept up my spine and I turned, scanning the darkness behind me. My instincts screamed that I wasn't alone. I quickly pocketed the locket, the weight of it now heavy in my pocket. I hurried back to my car, my heart pounding. The streets were eerily quiet, and as I drove away from the lake, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. It was just paranoia, I told myself. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of a figure lingering in the shadows, a dark silhouette that made my pulse quicken. I drove faster, my mind racing with thoughts of Jason and the secrets swirling around his death. Who could I trust? And what else was hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic community? The questions gnawed at me as I pulled into my driveway, the shadows around me growing longer and more menacing. As the engine purred to a stop, I stepped out, my eyes darting around. Unease settled in my stomach like a lead weight. I was determined to uncover the truth, but at what cost? With the locket still nestled in my pocket, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of something dangerous, something that could upend everything I thought I knew. As I pulled up to the town hall, the weight of the community's grief and suspicion hung in the air like a thick fog. The building, usually a beacon of unity, was now a battleground. I parked my car and took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that lay ahead. Inside, the room was packed with familiar faces, all of them twisted in various states of anger, confusion, and sadness. The whispers grew louder as I made my way to the front, where Tom Harris stood at the podium, his expression a mix of defiance and discomfort. "Thank you all for coming," he started, his voice booming but shaky. "I know we're all here for the same reason, to honor Jason Reed and to find closure after this tragic accident." The words felt hollow, and I could see the eyes of the crowd narrowing at his insincerity. I raised my hand to catch his attention, and when he finally acknowledged me, the room fell silent. "Tom, I need to ask you about the land deal Jason was involved in. There are rumors that he was going to expose something significant. Can you tell us what that was?" The tension in the room thickened. Tom's face darkened and a murmur rippled through the crowd. "This isn't the time or place for baseless accusations, Sarah," he replied, his voice steady but laced with annoyance. "Jason was a good man who made a mistake. We all make mistakes." "Do you mean the mistake of trying to look out for our community?" I pressed, refusing to back down. "Or the mistake of getting too close to someone who had a lot to lose?" The crowd stirred, some nodding in agreement, others shooting me disapproving glares. "Watch yourself," Tom said, his tone threatening. "You don't know what you're getting into." "I know more than you think," I shot back, feeling a fire ignite within me. "People are saying Jason's drowning wasn't an accident. They're saying he was threatened. You had everything to gain from his silence." The air crackled with tension as the crowd murmured, some voices rising in outrage, others in support of my claims. "Enough." Tom's voice boomed and the room fell silent once more. "Jason was my friend. I would never harm him. We had our disagreements, but that's all they were, disagreements. You're turning this into something it's not. Or am I uncovering the truth that you're desperate to hide?" I challenged, feeling adrenaline surge through me. The room erupted in chaos, people shouting over one another. Accusations flew, and I could see the division within our small town laid bare. Friends turned against friends, and the grief that had initially united us now drove a wedge deeper into our community. As the meeting spiraled out of control, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Carla, a longtime resident and one of Jason's closest friends. Her face was pale and I could see the fear in her eyes. "Sarah, you need to be careful. This isn't just about Jason anymore, it's about all of us. People are scared." "I know, Carla," I replied softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I can't walk away from this. Jason deserves justice." "Justice?" she echoed, her voice trembling. "Or revenge. You don't know what you're stirring up. Tom has powerful friends. If you push too hard, you could get hurt." "I can't just stand by and let this go," I insisted, my heart racing. What if he really was involved in something darker? What if Jason's death was more than just an accident? Carla looked at me, her expression a mixture of concern and resignation. Just promise me you'll be careful. I don't want to lose anyone else. As the meeting continued, I took a step back, trying to absorb the chaos around me. The accusations continued to fly, and I could feel the tension mounting. It was clear that the community was more divided than I had ever imagined, and the implications of Jason's death were far-reaching. Each voice raised against me was a reminder of the stakes involved. Later that evening, as I walked to my car, the shadows felt longer, the night darker. I was at a crossroads, standing on the precipice between my journalistic integrity and the mounting danger that surrounded my investigation. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that I was stepping into a world that was spiraling out of control. I climbed into my car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. With every ounce of my being, I knew I had to continue, to dig deeper into the web of secrets that bound this community together. But as I drove away from the town hall, a chill ran down my spine, a premonition that the truth I sought could come at a cost I wasn't prepared to pay. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the ground as I made my way towards Tom Harris's office. The air hummed with the promise of summer, but a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. I had pieced together a web of connections that tied Jason Reed and Tom together, a history riddled with tension and unspoken animosities over the land deal that had split our community in two. Today I would confront him, and I could only hope I was prepared for whatever revelation lay ahead. As I stepped into the office, the familiar scent of pine mingled with the faint aroma of coffee. Tom sat behind a large oak desk, his visage a mixture of surprise and annoyance as I entered. "Sarah, you're persistent, I'll give you that," he said, leaning back in his chair. The way he spoke, with that air of superiority, made my skin crawl. "Tom, I need to talk to you about Jason Reed," I asserted, trying to maintain my composure. "I've learned some things that I think you need to hear." He raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "What things?" "Jason's death was a tragic accident. We all know that." "Was it?" I probed, unable to mask the tremor in my voice. "You had a lot to gain from that land deal. People are saying that you and Jason had a feud. What was it really about?" His demeanor shifted, the lightness evaporating from the room. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Sarah. You do well to remember that. Jason was just a kid playing with fire." He was in over his head. Playing with fire? Or trying to expose the truth? I countered, my heart racing. "I have reason to believe that Jason found out something about you, something that could ruin you." Tom stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, his face darkening as he leaned across the desk. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You think you can just waltz in here and throw around accusations? You're better off leaving this alone." A chill ran down my spine as I stared into his piercing eyes. "What are you afraid of, Tom? That the truth will come out? That people will know what you really are?" He stepped back, the tension in the room palpable. "Be careful, Sarah. You're playing with fire too. I won't let you burn me." I swallowed hard, the weight of his threat hanging in the air. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid to find the truth, no matter where it leads." As I turned to leave, I could feel his presence bearing down on me, a reminder that the line between right and wrong was becoming increasingly blurred. Outside, the sun felt too bright, almost mocking in its cheerfulness against the gravity of the situation I had just faced. I needed to regroup, to sift through the pieces one more time. My mind raced as I walked through the streets of our small town, the familiar sights now tinged with an unsettling darkness. Memories of Jason flashed through my mind, his laughter, his kindness, and the way he had always stood up for what was right. I couldn't let his death go unanswered. Arriving at the edge of Crystal Lake, I crouched down, running my fingers through the pebbles along the shore. The water shimmered under the sunlight, but beneath its calm surface lay secrets waiting to be uncovered. I had to find a way to connect the dots, to make sense of the puzzle that was Jason's life and death. "Sarah," a voice called out, breaking my concentration. It was Mike, one of Jason's closest friends. "What are you doing here?" "Just thinking," I replied, forcing a smile despite the turmoil. "I'm trying to piece together what happened that night." "You know, there's more to it than you think," he said, glancing nervously around. "I've heard things Jason said before his death?" I finished, my heart racing. "What do you know, Mike?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if fearing someone might be listening. "He mentioned something about Tom. Something that could blow the whole land deal wide open. I thought it was just talk, but now you think it was more?" I pressed, feeling the urgency build within me. "Yeah, he was scared, Sarah. He thought he was in danger," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture was far from clear. I sensed the walls closing in, the threat of Tom looming larger than ever. I had to tread carefully, but I was resolved. I would uncover the truth no matter what it took. As I stood by the lake, I felt a surge of determination. For Jason, for the community, and for myself, I would not back down. As I sat at my cluttered kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the window illuminated the chaos of papers and notes that surrounded me. My heart raced as I flipped through the pages of Jason's journal, the leather-bound cover worn and familiar. The last thing I expected was to find a shocking confession nestled among his thoughts. The ink seemed to pulse with a life of its own, revealing a secret that would turn everything I thought I knew upside down. "Sarah, are you okay?" my friend Emily asked, peering over my shoulder, concern etching her features. I glanced up, momentarily lost in the weight of the revelation. I think I found something," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something about Jason?" she prodded, leaning closer. I flipped the page, my hands trembling as the words began to sink in. Jason had penned a confession about a pact he made with Tom Harris, a plan to fake his own drowning for insurance money. The implications danced in my mind like shadows, dark and foreboding. How could he have orchestrated this? "Sarah?" Emily's voice broke through my thoughts, pulling me back to reality. "What does it say?" "He was going to fake his drowning," I finally said, my voice trembling. "He thought he could set everything right after the land deal went south. But it spiraled out of control, and now he's dead," Emily finished for me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "But if he was the mastermind, what does that mean for Tom? Was he in on it?" I nodded slowly, swallowing hard. The truth was too grotesque to articulate. "It means Tom might not be the only one responsible for this tragedy. Jason had a hand in it too." I felt a chill crawl down my spine as I read more, Jason's words painting a picture of desperation and betrayal. He thought he could take the money and start fresh. But he never planned on it going this far. Emily shook her head, incredulous. "It's all so twisted. If he was going to fake his death, how did it end up like this?" "I don't know," I replied, biting my lip as I flipped to the last page. "There's something about a struggle, and a warning from Tom. It's like they both knew it could end badly." "Sarah, you need to take this to the police," she urged. "This changes everything. Tom has to be held accountable." I hesitated. But how do I explain this? That Jason was involved? The community is going to be devastated. Emily's expression softened. "You have to do what's right. The truth has to come out even if it hurts." "Right?" I whispered, my resolve hardening. "I'll go to the station. But if this falls apart, I'll be the one left holding the pieces." As I made my way to the sheriff's office, my heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the weight of the journal in my bag. I could already envision the faces of the townspeople, their disbelief and sorrow. Jason, once a beloved member of the community, now just another casualty of greed and betrayal. Upon entering the station, I was greeted by the stern face of Sheriff Collins. "Sarah, what brings you in today?" "I found something," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "It's about Jason and Tom. You need to see this." His brow furrowed as I handed over the journal. "What's this?" "Jason's confession. He was involved in a plan with Tom to fake his drowning," I explained, watching his reaction closely. Sheriff Collins flipped through the pages, his expression growing graver with every word. "If this is true, it changes everything. We need to investigate further." "I know it will be difficult for the community," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But they deserve to know the truth, even if it shatters their memories of Jason." As I stepped out of the station, the weight of the world rested on my shoulders. I felt the cool breeze against my skin, but it failed to cool the fire of revelation burning deep inside me. I had started this journey seeking justice for Jason, but now I was left grappling with the tragic outcome of my quest. I looked out over Crystal Lake, its surface calm and serene, a stark contrast to the turmoil that lay beneath. The community would never be the same, and in my heart, I knew I was about to witness the unraveling of everything they held dear.